All right, so we're going to start talking about conformity and obedience. And one key thing to do in, many of our units, obviously, but I think maybe even more important than usual for this one is to make some distinctions in different terminology. Most textbook chapters talk about conformity and obedience, but there is another type of social influence we'll also be talking about in this unit called compliance. But what do all four of those things mean? That's what I'm going to cover in this first section of the lecture. So if we think broadly about social influence, we're going to call that the effect of the real or imagined influence of other people, often resulting in changes in beliefs or behavior. So any type of influence from somebody else, whether it's some kind of request or an order or something indirect, persuasion attempt, something from authority, and again, it's effect of real or imagined influence. So it might be something that someone is actually doing, or something that you are just expecting someone to do, or literally imagining somebody to do. The first one out of these next three that are all examples of social influence, more specific types of social influence, is conformity. So we'll spend a great deal of time talking about conformity, and we'll kind of circle back to conformity when we talk about group processes in a bit. But conformity is a change in behavior or beliefs to match the behavior or beliefs of others. So noticing what other people are doing and adopting behavioral strategies or attitudes that fall in line with those people. So some examples of these, maybe you notice that a particular grocery store is popular and lots of people tend to go there. You hear people talking about it. You see the bags that people have around their house. You notice the parking lot's full. Well, I buy my groceries at Rouse's because most people I know, or I notice lots of people, tend to do it. That would be an example of conformity. Another one might be I read the Hunger Games series, or I read the Hunger Games series because I know all my friends like it. You notice that people that you like especially like something, and you kind of fall in to the way that they tend to do it. We've already gone over one kind of interesting study that has to do with conformity in our attitudes unit when we started talking about attitude change. Remember the Bennington College study, where it was about women at the Bennington College in the 1930s, and how there was a cohort of women that started out relatively conservative, and after their first year they became much less on overall conservative, and by the time they were in their junior or senior years, that proportion had dropped off from starting around 2/3 to somewhere around a sixth of them. So there are probably a lot of different types of social influence happening here, but one of them is probably conformity, that they were noticing what people around them were doing, and they were matching their attitudes and behaviors to match those. So, moving on from conformity, another example of this social influence, and another subset of social influences, is compliance. So this is a little bit different. Conformity is just about noticing what people are doing. Compliance is about responding to intentional types of influence from another person. So someone makes a particular request of you. They ask you to do something, or they tell you to do something. And if you do it, that is being amenable to compliance. So using kind of the same examples that I talked about for conformity, I buy my groceries at Rouse's because a commercial said to. Someone was making a particular appeal, trying to get me to do something, this advertisement telling me to buy groceries at this place, and I did it. I was listening to that. I complied with that request. Or interpersonally, rather than, with conformity, you just noticed your friends were reading the Hunger Games, so you read them. With compliance, I read the Hunger Games series because my friend asked me to. They said, hey, you would like this. I would like it if you'd read this, and we'd be able to talk about these books. So these are, again, a little more direct, obviously, than conformity. There's some intentionality involved. The last one that we'll talk about in this unit is obedience. So this is in a sense, not only a subset of social influence, but maybe even a subset of compliance in a sense. But obedience is a change in behavior in response to a specific command or authority. So again, a little bit different because it has to do with status hierarchies and the differences that people have in their influence and weight that they can throw around in a group. Usually status differences mean that people higher up in the hierarchy can withhold things from people lower in the hierarchy, and that is in part where obedient effects come from. There might also sometimes be the threat of violence as well in certain hierarchies, and if you are being threatened with physical violence, then it might be in your best interest then to obey. So using those same examples again, I buy my groceries at Rouse's because my parents pay for them if I buy them there, okay? You know, maybe they have some stake in Rouse's, or, you know, it's easier for them to pay for them somehow. But it's the status difference there because your parents are the ones that have the money for them. You have to follow their directions or orders in order to get the resource that you want. And if it were somebody different from your friends asking you to read some kind of book series or see some movies or something, I read the Hunger Games series because my boss told me I had to. Might be kind of a bizarre work relationship there, or maybe people are, you know, working at some place where they have to review books or something, or they're working at a library or bookstore. But in any case, if somebody higher up, like parents or a boss or some kind of political official told you to do something, that would be an example of obedience if you followed their orders. So this is kind of the broad world of social influence that we're going to be talking about for the remainder of this section. So remember, conformity, compliance, and obedience are subsets